king. So this Christmas, remember that things don't determine your worth. My love does, and I love you enough to die for you.
When I look your way, I see a blur of frenzied activity and a trail of exhaustion and frustration that follows your life like a plume of smoke behind a rocket. You whisper with greater frequency than ever before, I don't want to keep living my life like this. Well, here's the good news this Christmas. You don't have to. Listen closely, hurried one. What you're looking for will never come your way by adding velocity, pleasing more people, or putting more points on the scoreboard of your life. Deep down, you are looking for me, your creator. Deep down, you're looking for green pastures and still waters, for peace. And I can lead you there and teach you over time to live there. Trust me, hurried one, before it's too late. Trust me.
Dear addicted one, believe it or not, I understand the shame you feel, and I derive no joy from heaping more of it on you. I have heard your impassioned resolves and desperate promises to never let it happen again. And I was there when you broke your promise and let yourself and everyone else around you down again. I am there as you dust off your shattered self-worth and vow anew to never fall again. It is time for a new and radical plan. You can implement it right now, as millions others already have. You can accept that you are powerless over what has its claws in you. And you can tell a friend today what is really true. Then look up, straight up, and see my strong hand being extended to you. And grab hold. You can be set free this very Christmas.
My child, you are so little and the world is so big. It can be a confusing and frightening place. There are so many things you might find scary. Bullies, school, sickness, pain, and anger. Even new experiences can be frightening. Trust me, I understand. At the first Christmas, I came to Earth as a tiny baby. I faced each and every one of those things. I know what it's like. I want to remind you that you are my child and I will take care of you. I created this world and I conquered death. I am bigger than anything that may be frightening or worrying you right now. You are never meant to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. That's my job. So as you face this confusing world, remember that I watch over you and am always close. No matter what you are going through, I am right beside you. I'll give you my strength and my peace. All you need to do is trust me.
No one likes to be poor, to have to go without, but this year you have lost your job, your nest egg, and your financial footing. You have always had enough for a house, a car, and maybe even a few toys now and then. But this time it's different. It's scary. But know this, I care. I know what it is to live in abject poverty. May I remind you of the circumstances of my birth? You know, Bethlehem, the stable, a manger, Joseph and Mary forced to relocate in Egypt and to start over. So I'm going to ask you to trust me like they did. I'm going to ask you to look to me every day. I am still watching, and I will care for you. Watch closely, and you will notice the little miracles of provision that I am doing for you. Watch closely, and you will see something you might have missed for years, that I take care of my children each and every day. I'm not promising you riches. I am promising you joy.
Thank you, readers. Did you identify with any of the people here on the stage? And did you hear any of God's voice speaking to you? You know, all of us come to life with some issues. We all have obstacles in our way. Maybe they're physical, maybe they're sociological, maybe they're economic. We all have obstacles or things that seem to block us from where we want to be, where we want to go, those goals we have for our lives. Some of us deal with pain. Some of us deal with the past. Some of us wish that we could get rid of the baggage that we can't seem to shake free of. But the fact is, all of us here are not perfect. All of us here have things that we must deal with in this life. And I want you to think and consider for a moment the characters of the Christmas story. I've just guessed at perhaps what their issue was. In fact, if you grab in your bulletin the notes for this morning, I've listed some of the key characters of the Christmas story. And I didn't connect the dots for you except the first one. Who would be the stressed teenager? The one who's concerned about this pregnancy as an unwed mother. Of course, that's Mary. Or the shamed breadwinner, Joseph, who literally for the rest of his life dealt with the shame that he accepted freely of an illegitimate child, birth out of wedlock. Now, you may not think this is an issue, but the next issue is being rich and famous. You may think, well, that's the glory, that's the pot at the end of the rainbow. But you know, being famous and having tremendous wealth may have a burden of its own. Just ask Tiger Woods. Who are they in the Christmas story? The wise men, or some call them the kings. We don't know if there were 3 or how many they were, but they brought very precious gifts to Jesus. They traveled perhaps 1,000 miles to see him. Obviously, they were well-to-do. They came from a culture that was polytheistic, and they were looking for this king that had been prophesied about, this king who would be above all kings who ever lived, King of kings and the Lord of lords, and they found the baby Jesus. Then you have someone, really a group of people that were experiencing extreme poverty. We talked about them last week, the shepherds, and they came to visit the baby. A widow alone named Anna. She had been married for 7 years, no doubt, probably as a teenager, and in her 20s was faced with some choices. And she chose to go and live in the temple. Perhaps that was the only choice she had, and she's there for probably some 60 years. And then there was this man who had been waiting on God. God had made him a promise. It was not fulfilled. And he was waiting and waiting perhaps for decades. Simeon, who was drawn to the temple by the Spirit to speak about the child to his parents. All of these people met Jesus as a baby. And what's interesting, in none of their cases was their issue taken away. Mary and Joseph remained poor, remained with this stigma the rest of their lives by the rank and file of society. The wise men were still rich and famous. The shepherds were still poor. The issues continued, and when someone comes to meet Jesus, it doesn't necessarily mean that all obstacles and pain depart from their life. God does some things in our lives that we recognize as, for sure, this is the real deal. But as we all have issues, before we met Christ, we still have issues after we met Christ. Now, in your notes, you see some scriptures. The first is written by Peter, the disciple of Jesus, about 30 years after the resurrection, after he ascended into heaven, and after Peter had gone around sharing the gospel, the good news about Jesus Christ. And notice what he says about this Savior, this Messiah. For the Messiah, or Christ, also died for sin